The Saturday morning routine had its own quiet religion. Marcus would wake before dawn, make his coffee in the French press the way he always did, precise, unhurried, and by the time I rolled over to find his side of the bed empty and cool, he and Emma would already be in the driveway, her little backpack bouncing as she climbed into his car. I know, baby. Daddy time. That's what she called it. Every Saturday, without fail, for the last 2 years. I used to think it was the sweetest thing I'd ever seen. Ridgewood Family Learning Center. That's what he'd told me. An enrichment program. Reading comprehension. Early math. Some art. For bright kids who needed a little more than what kindergarten offered. Emma qualified, he said. He'd read about it. He'd already enrolled her. By the time he mentioned it to me, it was done. I remember feeling a small, strange pang. Not of suspicion, just of exclusion. The kind that you file away and tell yourself is petty. And then I kissed him on the cheek and told him it sounded wonderful. He was always doing things like that. Handling it. That was his phrase. I've got it handled. The dentist appointments, the insurance claims, the school forms, the permission slips. Marcus ran our household the way he ran his portfolio, efficiently, with total control and with a studied patience toward anyone who questioned his methods. It had felt like a gift in the beginning. I was 28 when we married, stretched thin between my job at the architectural firm and the particular grief of a mother who died the year before. Someone who handled things was exactly what I thought I needed. Emma was 3 when we got married. She was mine from a relationship that had ended quietly and without drama before Marcus and I ever met. Her biological father had signed away his rights without much protest. Marcus adopted her at 4. He had cried at the courthouse. Real tears, the kind that come from somewhere deep. I had loved him so completely in that moment that I had no room left for doubt about anything. The Saturday he couldn't take her, he was apologetic about it. A client call, a time zone disaster, a window that couldn't be moved. He'd looked genuinely pained standing in the kitchen in his dress shirt at 7 in the morning, his coffee going cold. Can you take her? Just drop her at the front desk, they know the routine. He'd looked at me with that particular expression, warm, tired, slightly beseeching, and I had said, of course, don't worry, go take your call. He kissed me. He kissed Emma. He went upstairs. I loaded my daughter into the car seat and typed the address he'd given me into my phone. The building was a low, sand-colored structure off a commercial strip in a part of town I didn't often drive through. Professional park, modest signage. I pulled into the parking lot and looked up at the entrance, and the name above the door was not Ridgewood Family Learning Center. It said Crestwood Pediatric and Family Wellness Associates. I sat in the car for a long moment. Emma was already unbuckling herself in the back, chattering about something she planned to show Miss Sandra. I turned in my seat. "Who is Miss Sandra?" I asked. Emma gave me the particular look that small children reserve for adults who have asked very stupid questions. "She's Miss Sandra," she said. "She has a fish tank with a blue one." The waiting room was cheerful in the deliberate, effortful way of mental health offices. Primary colors, soft chairs, a low table with crayons and laminated activity sheets. A woman at the front desk looked up when we came in and then looked again, her expression doing something complicated and quick that she smoothed over immediately. "Emma Walker," I said. "Her Saturday appointment." "Of course," she smiled. "And you are?" "Her mother." Another small recalibration in the woman's face. "Of course." She pulled up something on her screen. "Can I get your name for our records?" I gave it. She typed. A pause longer than it should have been. "I'll let Miss Sandra know you're here. She usually comes out to get Emma." The woman's tone had changed, carefully neutral now, the way someone sounds when they're deciding what to say next. "If you'd like to wait, there's coffee in the corner." Emma ran to the fish tank. I stood at the front desk. "I'm sorry," I said, keeping my voice light. "I've never actually been inside before. My husband usually handles the drop-off. Could you remind me, is this just the wellness program, or is this also where her therapy sessions are?" The woman looked at me, then at her screen, then back at me. "Emma sees Dr. Sandra Mercer for her weekly integrative family sessions, she said slowly. Has been since she was 4. I'm sorry, I assumed you were fully informed about the treatment plan. The room didn't tilt. I didn't grab the desk. I just nodded the way you nod when someone says something in a foreign language and you don't want them to know you didn't understand. Of course, I said. I just wanted to confirm the notes on our file were updated with my contact information. That's actually what I wanted to raise, the woman said, her voice dropping slightly. The emergency contacts on file. They only list your husband and a woman listed as Emma's co-parent. I'd been meaning to ask him to update it. We like to have both guardians accessible. A co-parent. I wrote down my number on the form she slid toward me. My hand did not shake. The hallway door opened and a woman in her late 30s, with kind eyes and reading glasses pushed up into her hair, came out, crouching to Emma's level with the ease of someone who had done this hundreds of times. There she is, Miss Sandra said. Ready for our Saturday? Emma took her hand without looking back at me. They disappeared through the door. I went to the corner and poured coffee I didn't drink and stood very still while the world quietly rearranged itself into something I didn't recognize. The drive home took 12 minutes. I know because I counted stoplights to keep myself from pulling over and sitting on the curb. Inside the house, Marcus was still on his call, his voice a low, measured murmur from behind the closed office door. I went to the kitchen. I set down my keys. I opened my laptop. I typed the name of the practice into the search bar. Crestwood Pediatric and Family Wellness. Their website was clean and professional. They specialized in integrated care for children dealing with chronic illness in the family. Grief, complex family systems, early trauma, complex family systems. I went to my email and searched for anything from Marcus related to Emma's enrichment program. There were several. Forward confirmations, schedule reminders, one note early on where he'd written, found a great Saturday program for Em, already handled enrollment, sleep in this weekend. I had replied with a heart emoji. I had not asked a single follow-up question. I opened the school's parent portal next. Marcus had set it up. He managed the login. I typed in what I thought the password was, Emma's birthday, invalid. Our anniversary, invalid. I tried 3 more combinations, all invalid. He had locked me out of the school portal the same way. I realized he had locked me out of everything to do with Emma's medical life. I sat back. The refrigerator hummed. The office door was still closed. 2 years. Every Saturday morning. A therapist named Ms. Sandra, who Emma adored and who I had never once heard mentioned. A co-parent listed in her emergency contacts. An enrichment program that was not an enrichment program. My phone buzzed with a reminder. Emma pickup, noon. I had 2 hours. I went to Marcus's desk in the alcove off the hallway. He had a filing drawer on the left side, the kind with a small lock that he kept the key for on his keychain. I had noticed it the way you notice things that are simply part of the landscape. Furniture, a habit, unremarkable. I tugged the handle. Locked, of course it was. I went to the kitchen junk drawer and found his spare keys on a ring I'd been meaning to return to him for months. The third key I tried turned. The drawer held hanging files, each tabbed and labeled in his handwriting. Insurance, tax, mortgage, and then at the back, thicker than the others, a manila folder with no label. I pulled it out and carried it to the kitchen island. The top sheet was a letter from a pediatric hematology practice in Charlotte, North Carolina, dated 14 months ago. The patient name was Sophie Renee Calloway, date of birth putting her at 5 years old. The letter was addressed to Marcus Calloway, not Marcus Walker, the last name we shared, and it referenced an ongoing treatment plan for juvenile systemic lupus with secondary aplastic anemia and the necessity of identifying a suitable allogenic stem cell donor given the failure of standard immunosuppressive therapy. I didn't know what aplastic anemia was. I typed it into my phone with one thumb while I kept reading, a condition where the bone marrow stops producing enough blood cells, treatable with a stem cell transplant. Survival rates significantly improved when the donor is a sibling with a high HLA match. I flipped to the next page. It was a lab report. The header read Nova Biotech Diagnostics. The patient listed was Emma Renee Walker. The test panel included something called a high-resolution HLA typing. At the bottom of the page, in a section I had to read 3 times, was a comparative analysis. Patient Emma R2. Walker demonstrates an ADA-STEN HLA antigen match with reference patient Sophie R. Calloway. Compatibility assessment. Favorable for related donor stem cell transplant. Recommended. Proceed to confirmatory bone marrow biopsy at appropriate developmental stage. Emma Renee Walker. Sophie Renee Calloway. They shared a middle name. I went very still for a very long time. In the back of the folder, I found a photograph tucked between a receipt and a plain envelope. Marcus, younger, his hair longer, standing on the steps of what looked like an apartment building in summer. His arm was around a woman with dark curly hair and a wide, genuine smile. She was laughing at whoever was behind the camera. The easy, unguarded laugh of someone completely at home. On the back, in blue ink, Charlotte, August. Then a single initial, D for Diane. I would later learn. I heard the office door open. I heard him in the hallway. I heard him stop. I was still standing at the kitchen island when he came around the corner, his phone in his hand, and I watched his face go through the sequence. Confusion, recognition, and then a kind of stillness that I had never seen on him before. It was not the stillness of guilt. It was the stillness of calculation. "What is this?" I said. It wasn't a question. It was a doorway. He set his phone down on the counter. He looked at the folder, at the lab report facing up on the island. He looked at me. "How did you—" "I took Emma this morning," I said. "Because you couldn't. And the address you gave me was a therapy office, Marcus. Not an enrichment center, not some Saturday program. She's been seeing a therapist for 2 years that I knew nothing about. There is a woman listed as her co-parent in the emergency contacts. And this," I pushed the lab report toward him. "This is a tissue typing report on our 6-year-old daughter, matched against a child named Sophie Calloway who shares her middle name and apparently shares something else too." He was quiet. He was very good at quiet. It had always been one of the things I admired about him, the ability to not fill silence with noise. Now it felt predatory. "Sophie is my daughter," he said. My voice, when I answered, came out lower than I expected. "I know that. I can see that. Tell me the rest." He pulled out a stool and sat down, resting his forearms on the counter. The posture of a man preparing to explain something complicated to someone less equipped to understand it. "Diane and I were together before you. College, then after. On and off for years. She got pregnant. It wasn't planned, and we weren't in a place where it could work. We separated. She moved back to Charlotte with her family. I didn't know for almost 2 years that she'd kept the baby. By the time I found out Sophie existed, she was already 18 months old. "Why didn't you tell me?" I said. He looked at the counter. "Because by the time I found out, Sophie was already sick. And by the time I found you, I already knew she needed a match." The room was so quiet I could hear the clock above the stove. "Say that again." His jaw shifted. "I had Emma tested," he said, "because Sophie's only real chance is a related donor. Half-siblings are the best pool. Unrelated registry matches are too uncertain, too slow. Sophie's condition is deteriorating. She's been on immunosuppressants for 3 years. Her marrow is giving out." He looked up at me. "Emma is a strong match. A bone marrow donation at her age is a manageable procedure. The recovery is real, but it's short-term. In 6 months, she would never know. In 6 months, she would never know. In 6 months, she would never know." I heard myself say it back to him. He didn't flinch. "You brought a child into your life," I said carefully, "who already had a biological match with the daughter you needed to save. That's not how it happened. Tell me how it happened. Tell me how it happened." He exhaled. "Emma's father was out of the picture. You were doing it alone. I was in the right place at the right time, and I genuinely fell in love with both of you. That part is true. I need you to believe that. But you had her tested," I said, "when she was 4 years old. You took her to a private diagnostics lab and had her tissue typed without telling me, without my knowledge or consent. Sophie was in crisis, he said, and his voice had shifted, harder now, losing some of the careful softness. She was 6 years old and she was deteriorating, and Emma was right there, and the genetics lined up, and I needed to know. I wasn't planning it. I wasn't going to do anything without your knowledge eventually. I was going to tell you. When, I said, when it was time. When it was time. I looked at this man, the man who had cried at a courthouse when he adopted my daughter, who made her pancakes on Sunday in the shapes she requested, who read to her every single night without exception, who had, I now understood, selected her, found her, moved himself into our orbit with the patience of someone playing a very long game. You chose me because Emma might be compatible, I said. That is not what happened, but it's what you hoped. When you met us, a little girl, same age as Sophie, healthy, biological half-sibling candidate, you hoped. His silence was its own answer. I need you to understand something, he said at last, his voice softening back into that persuasive register. Sophie is not an abstraction. She's a real child. She is funny and she is brave, and she draws horses obsessively, and she is dying, slowly, in a city 4 hours from here, and her mother is exhausted and terrified, and has been alone in this for years while I sent money and visited when I could, and told myself I was doing enough. He leaned forward. Emma would not be harmed. This is not surgery on a vital organ. A bone marrow harvest is outpatient. The side effects are temporary. She would go under sedation, wake up, eat popsicles, and in a year she would have no memory of it, and her sister would be alive. Her sister. He used the word like it was a key. You don't get to use that word right now, I said. You had my daughter tested for tissue compatibility, and you hid it inside a therapy practice, and you locked me out of every medical record she has so I wouldn't find out. And you have been planning. For how long? How long have you been planning to ask me? He was quiet. Or were you going to ask me at all? Margot. My name is not Margot. My name is Claire. You've called me by the wrong name twice since I walked in here. My name is Claire, and I am Emma's mother, and you had her typed for organ harvesting at age 4 without asking me. Were you going to ask me? Yes or no? The silence stretched. I walked down the hall and into the coat closet and found Emma's backup bag on the top shelf. I started putting things in it the way you do when your hands need something to do so your brain can keep working. Behind me, I heard Marcus move into the hallway. Claire. His voice was reasonable. Controlled. Let's not do anything drastic. Let's sit down and talk through this like adults. Sophie doesn't have much time. The window for Emma to donate is this year, while they're both young enough that the recovery is optimal. After that, the medical picture changes. I'm not asking you to do this without information. I have all the reports, all the specialist consultations. I want you to read them. I want you to understand that this is the right thing to do, that Emma will be proud of this someday. I zipped the bag. If you take Emma somewhere without telling me, he said, and now the reasonable voice had a new edge in it, just below the surface, I need you to understand that I am her legal adoptive father. I have equal custodial rights. Any lawyer will tell you that. I turned around. You had my daughter tissue typed without my consent, I said. That's a medical decision made without the knowledge of her biological mother. That alone is a gray area. He cut me off. The tone had changed again, quieter, more deliberate. The mask had shifted. You signed a broad medical authorization when we married. Standard language. It covers diagnostic testing broadly defined. He paused. I don't want this to become adversarial, Claire. I really don't. But Sophie is running out of time, and I will do what I have to do to save my daughter. Both of my daughters. I prefer to do it with you. But the outcome is the same either way. That was the moment the last piece of pretense fell away. I looked at my husband. This man I had let into every soft, unguarded part of my life. Who had handled things? Who had handled everything? I reached into the cabinet above the refrigerator where I kept my emergency cash, $300 folded behind a box of pasta, and I put it in the bag. Then I picked up my phone, went to the bathroom, locked the door, and called the one number I had saved 3 hours earlier when I had been sitting in the parking lot of Crestwood Pediatric and Family Wellness, and decided, without fully knowing why, to look up family law attorneys who specialized in medical coercion. Her name was Rebecca Torres. Her assistant answered on the second ring. I told her my name. I told her I had a 6-year-old daughter, an adoptive father who had conducted covert medical testing on her, documentation in my hands, and a confrontation that had included explicit verbal threats recorded on the phone I was holding. The assistant put me through immediately. I told Rebecca Torres everything in 11 minutes. She said, "Are you safe right now?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Can you get the child?" I said, "I'm picking her up at noon." She said, "Here's what you're gonna do." Emma was quiet in the back seat on the drive to the hotel Rebecca's assistant had booked under a firm account. She had a juice box and her stuffed rabbit, and she could tell something was wrong in the particular way children can tell without knowing what to name it. She asked where Daddy was. I said he was at home. She accepted this with the solemn practicality of a 6-year-old who has learned not to push. At a red light, I looked at her in the rearview mirror, the particular shape of her face, the way she chewed the straw when she was thinking. I thought about the word Sophie, the matching middle name, the photograph of a laughing woman in Charlotte with a daughter who drew horses and sat through dialysis and did not know she had a sister. The light changed. I drove. Rebecca met with me the next morning. She was exactly what her website had suggested: brisk, thorough, and completely unimpressed by anything I put in front of her. She went through the folder. She listened to the recording. She read the lab report twice. "Here's what we have," she said. "Unauthorized medical testing of a minor, fraudulent misrepresentation of medical appointments, systematic exclusion of the biological parent from medical decision-making, and explicit verbal statements indicating intent to coerce you into consenting to an elective procedure on a minor for the benefit of a third party." She set down her pen. "He is right that the authorization language you signed was broad. But broad does not mean unlimited. It does not authorize secret bone marrow harvesting planning. It does not authorize secret bone marrow harvesting planning. It does not authorize HLA tissue typing conducted for the purpose of evaluating your daughter as a donor for his other child." "What does he have?" I asked. "He has money and he has time," she said evenly. "And those are real advantages. But you have evidence, and you have a recording, and you have the single most important thing in a family court proceeding." She looked at me. "You have a clean record and a mother's standing. No judge in this state will look at what he did and call it standard parenting. We file for an emergency protective order today. We move for suspension of his medical decision-making authority pending a full investigation, and we make a record of the coercion statements before he has time to build his counter-narrative." That same afternoon, she filed. 2 days later, his attorney called hers and offered a settlement conversation. Rebecca said no. She said we'd see them in court. The hearing was 4 days after that. I sat beside Rebecca at a table that felt too small for everything it held. Across the aisle, Marcus looked the way he always looked. Composed, expensive, patient. His attorney was a silver-haired man named Whitmore who wore the particular expression of someone accustomed to winning on points. Whitmore argued that Marcus had acted out of profound paternal love for a critically ill child, that the testing had been exploratory, not conclusive, that no procedure had been scheduled, that I was a distressed woman catastrophizing a situation born of compassion and grief. He used the word love 11 times in 15 minutes. I counted. Rebecca played the recording. The courtroom was quiet in a way. Courtroom was quiet in a way. Courtrooms usually aren't. The outcome is the same either way. I will do what I have to do to save my daughter. The judge, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, removed those glasses after the recording ended and set them on the bench and looked at Marcus for a long time. Then she looked at his attorney. Then she granted everything we asked for. sole medical and legal decision-making authority pending the outcome of the full custody evaluation, supervised visitation at a family center twice monthly, no unsupervised access to Emma's medical providers, school, or extracurricular activities, a mandatory psychological evaluation, a referral to the district attorney's office for review of the unauthorized medical testing. Marcus's face when the gavel came down was the face of a man who had miscalculated. He leaned toward me as we gathered our things, his voice so low only I could hear it. "You've destroyed the only real chance Sophie has," he said. "I hope you can live with that." I looked at him. I thought about Emma on the Saturday mornings I had slept through, the fish tank in the waiting room, the co-parent listed in the emergency contacts, the folder in the locked drawer. "You had 2 years to ask me," I said. "You chose not to. That was your decision." I walked out into the October sunlight and called Emma's school and asked them to update the emergency contact list. 3 weeks later, I received a voicemail from a number with a Charlotte area code. I listened to it twice before I called back. Her name was Diane. She had a careful, tired voice, the voice of someone who had been careful and tired for a very long time. She said she'd been contacted by Marcus's attorney as a character witness and had instead called me because she'd done some thinking and some reading and she needed to say something directly to me. "I didn't know," she said, "about Emma, about the testing. He told me there was a potential match he was pursuing. He never told me it was a child. He never told me she was 6 years old. He told me a donor had been identified through the family registry, that the family had been consulted." She paused. I believed him because I needed to believe him. She is everything. She is my entire world. And I needed there to be an answer, and I let myself not ask the questions I should have asked. "I'm sorry. I'm telling you this because you deserve to hear it from me directly. I'm sorry." I sat with that for a while after we hung up. I thought about what it meant to be a mother who would do anything, who had already done too much and not enough and all the wrong things and kept going anyway because the alternative was unthinkable. I thought about Diane and Charlotte, not the villain of this story. Not really. Just another woman in orbit around a man who had decided the ends, justified everything. I sent her a text 3 days later. It said, "I heard you. I believe you. I hope Sophie gets her miracle." She replied, "Thank you." Then, she's been listed on the National Marrow Registry for 6 months. Last week they found a potential match. A 23-year-old in Oregon who registered last year. We're waiting on confirmatory testing. I read it again. A stranger in Oregon. Someone who had walked into a blood drive or a health fair and checked a box and not thought much about it. Someone whose ordinary kindness might be the thing that saved a little girl's life. Not Emma. Emma, who was currently in the kitchen eating apple slices and explaining to her grandmother, my mother-in-law, my own mother having passed, but my father's wife who loved Emma extravagantly and with great noise, why the rabbit needed a hat and the hat needed sequins, and the sequins needed to be purple specifically. My father was reading the paper in the armchair. He had driven up from Raleigh 3 days after I'd called him and had said nothing particularly useful, and had been exactly the right kind of present and steady. He looked up at me over his glasses when I came into the room, and just nodded once, the way fathers do when the words would take too long. Emma held up the rabbit. "Does this look like a queen rabbit or a princess rabbit?" she demanded. I considered the issue seriously. "Queen," I said, "definitely a queen." She examined the rabbit with satisfaction. "That's what I said." The custody evaluation took 4 months. The evaluator was a forensic psychologist named Dr. Patricia Kim, who asked Emma quiet questions in a neutral room with toys on a low shelf, and asked me detailed questions about the last 3 years, and reviewed the school and medical records Rebecca had subpoenaed in their complete unredacted form. Her report was 42 pages. The summary was 12 words. The child's primary secure attachment is demonstrably with the biological mother. Permanent sole legal and physical custody was granted. Marcus was given monthly supervised visitation, contingent on completion of his psychological evaluation and evidence of ongoing individual therapy. The DA's office declined to prosecute. The authorization language had been just broad enough, but the state medical licensing board opened a review of the diagnostics lab that had conducted the testing without documented parental consent from both guardians. The prenuptial agreement, which Marcus had referenced once, quietly, in a phone call Rebecca had recorded, was rendered moot. There was nothing in it that addressed a scenario in which one party had entered the marriage with the undisclosed intent to use a minor child as a medical resource. I moved back to my own city 3 months after the final order, found a good school, joined a neighborhood that had a coffee shop I liked and a park within walking distance and a community center where Emma started a Saturday dance class. Real Saturday, the kind where she comes home with her hair half down and tells me the full plot of whatever drama happened between the 7-year-olds at the Bower. One evening, I was sitting on the porch steps when my phone buzzed. A photo from Diane's number. No message, just the image. A small girl with dark curly hair, lying in a hospital bed, holding a stuffed horse, grinning so hard her whole face was involved in it. The kind of smile that takes up all available space. Below it, after a moment, day 3, post-transplant. Still fighting. Donor match held. I stared at it for a long time. That little girl who was not my daughter's burden to bear, who had found her miracle in the ordinary generosity of a stranger in Oregon, that little girl who would grow up not knowing how close she had come to having her life saved by someone who had no say in the matter. I wrote back a single word. Good. Then I went inside, and I called Emma in from the backyard, and I helped her find the purple sequins, and we stayed out past bedtime making the rabbit into a queen. Later, when she was asleep, I sat in the hallway outside her door the way I had started doing some nights, not out of fear exactly, more out of the habit of gratitude. The nightlight threw a pale stripe across the hall floor. Inside, Emma was breathing in the reliable, unhurried rhythm of a child who feels safe. She would ask about Marcus someday. She would ask in the way children ask things, suddenly, in the middle of something unrelated, with no warning and no context. And I would tell her the truth, the parts that were hers to know at each age, in the careful, honest way that Rebecca's therapist had suggested and that I had been practicing already in my head for months. She would know she had a half-sister. I'd decided that much. When the time was right, when Sophie was well enough, if Diane was willing, they could know each other. That part of the story didn't have to be another casualty. What had happened to us was a long, methodical theft. A theft of information, of agency, of the basic right to be told the truth about my own child's body. And what I had learned, standing in that parking lot outside a wellness practice on a Saturday morning with the sun still low and the address wrong and my daughter asking about a fish tank, was that the instinct to trust is not the same as the obligation to be silent. I had not stayed silent. That was the only ending I needed.